Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. This is the companion video that I'm hosting to go with my Circu, the Demir Lobotomist deck, the combo deck that I had previously posted. These videos are kind of just here for a deck list example for a primer that I'm trying to resurrect and finish. This is a different deck from my previous two Vela decks. Earlier in my channel I've posted a budget theme Vela deck and another type of combo deck that doesn't really use Vela. But for my guide I went ahead and put together what my Vela deck used to be like a couple years ago. This is a combo deck that actually works with Vela. It focuses on her ability, her leave, play, burn effect. There's lots of ways to do this, and I will link my deck list and my current status of my primer into the description of this video, which has more thorough explanations, other examples of combos with her. There's lots of ways of doing it. In this particular design, I'm doing what my Circu deck does. I am creating a loop of creatures coming in and out of play. If you guys saw my Circu deck, you know that he is a rather complicated general. Not really complicated, but not mainstream. He's not smooth. He's not usually considered efficient for competitive play. Vela is slightly better than him. Still considered usually a casual combo general, because both of them just fail in comparison to something like Una, which is just a very obvious, easy combo general. Vela is still easier to run than Circu. Her requirement to combo is to simply have a creature leave play. So just instead of having to cast like Circu does, she just has to have some kind of flicker effect. So, the other effects on Vela here, she is a 6-mana human wizard. Wizard tribal, of course, really helps in this style of deck. With a 4/4 Intimidate body, she gives everything else Intimidate. You sometimes see her in some kind of combat shenanigans decks, maybe a tribal ninja effect. The combo element, although, is her second part there, where she or a creature were to leave the battlefield, she bleeds all the opponents for 1 life. So flickering a creature infinitely means you can then infinitely bleed everyone out. There's other synergies and whatnot. This deck is, since it's easier to run her than Circu, I've made this particular list much more relaxed and essentially still more equally or slightly more effective than Circu. It is a lot easier to make this happen, so there's more room for control, less cards required, less duplicity. There's still duplicity, but it's just less stringent, if that makes sense. Let's set her over here, and I'm going to go through the creatures. Like Circu, Vela decks work, this combo works with an interaction of creatures. There are, again, I will explain, just like my Circu deck, how the combos function in this deck. I'll go ahead and cite a few other examples if you're interested in making this more cutthroat combo, all-in combo instead of combo control. My first Circu video I posted was all-in combo with little control. I'm going to be posting another Circu deck shortly, another example deck that is combo control. This is also combo control. It's not all-in combo. So, all-in combo usually just has straight combo, little elements of support, control, and trying to survive. This deck has lots of interactions, lots of ways surviving, encounters, and whatnot. Value creatures all over the place. Wizard tribal heavy theme here, so we have definitely the Riptide Laboratory to help with Snapcaster. The Baleful Strix is great at doing a nice early defensive measure for call or draw. This deck also runs the clone package. It's, again, very similar to my first Circu list. So again, cloning something like these guys is great. Again, a little bit of control package there. Solemn is great at early ramp. I don't even think a Solemn made it into my Circu list. He just focused entirely on the combo. Teferi is there to help us lock our combo in place. It's also great at becoming a flash enabler for our general. There is not a bounce effect, the Omniscience bounce creature whatnot in this deck. It is not efficient enough for Vela. So, but we still have Venser because he's just really good tempo. Another great clone target. And another combo with the Detai coming up here is another counterspell. There's a pretty nice counter suite in this deck, and he acts great. And of course there's the Runescarred Demon, just another generic good blue-black combo is Runescarred and Rite of Replication. But of course it's a tutor. Unlike my Circu first deck I listed, this is again a casual laid back, more of a not aggressive combo. There's only 3 tutors in this entire deck. The deck does not actually require a lot of tutors because it's more control-ish. He is one of the tutors. This is a grindier deck, so it takes longer games, and I do tend to have a lot of board presence, so I have the Eldrazi Bros in here to help with alternative means of winning. And now we're on to the actual win conditions. Cloud of Fairies, it sometimes does fit in Circu. There's not a lot of potential board positions where Cloud can combo with Circu. It does, although, combo with Vela very easily, so it's definitely worth a cut in this deck. Either way, it cycles, so even if you don't need it early, it's great. We still have the Drake and the Whale, but of course Palancron is the easy, cheesy combo, so of course it made it in here. There is, of course, a clone package to go with this. Phantasmal Image is the best clone, just like Circu. These are the 2 easy creatures to go for. And then we have the Phyrexian Metamorph and Sakashima, Clever Impersonator, and Evil Twin. The exact same clones that were in my Circu deck, because personal preference. There are, of course, more clones you can pick. These are just the ones I like. Going on to the spells, as I said, this deck only has the Demon and 2 counterspells. I refused to put excessive counterspells in this deck. So we have a Vampiric Tutor and a Demonic Tutor. That's actually it. Like, straight up counterspells, it's these 3 cards, nothing else. Everything else is going to be relying on what I can do with what I am given and what I draw into. But I still have to stay alive. We have Toxic Deluge and Damnation for some creature answers. All is Dust is a generic wipe. I may end up taking this right back out because, again, my combos revolve around interactions of creatures. This actually may hurt me more, but for a multiplayer table, this takes care of a lot of things. And there is, of course, a counter package here. Trick Bind is fantastic at stopping someone else from trying to combo out. It's one of my favorite counter spells. I wish people would play this more often. Then we have Counter Squall, which is non-creature burn 2. Muddle is technically a counter. I don't have a lot of 2 mana costing targets to counter or search for. The Phantasmal Image and maybe the Cloud is really it. But we have just Counterspell, we have a Mana Drain, we have the Remand for tempo. Memory Lapse is, I just love this artwork, it's probably not good enough to be in here. Remove Soul, same thing. Undermine is a hard burn for 3, kind of a little overcosted. Dissipate will help us counter and exile, counter and draw, exile, not quite a counter, counter and untap, and counter and whatnot from the Cryptic. So a nice chunk of counter spells. Maybe, again, in a more competitive control combo deck, you want the free counter spells. You want the Force of Will, you want the Pact of Negation, because you won't always have the mana to counter someone who's trying to stop you from winning the game. But again, we still have to stay alive. So those are answers for what's on the stack. Here's some answers for what's already in play. Capsize is a great win condition. I don't have an infinite mana combo in here other than using the Detai, which is essentially a combo with Vela itself. But if somehow Vela became unavailable, then this is a potential win with the mana. Rift and Evacuation are our bounces. Alternative ways of messing with the opponent. Again, we don't always need our combo. Bribery can do it very quick and early. Right is another win condition with the Demon and whatever may be on the board, essentially requiring a board wipe. Mana Short is just one of my favorite cards. Someone gave me this particular card, had to find a place for it. Fits in this deck, although it's usually better in 1v1. Ancestral Vision and Blue Suns are my draw for the deck. This is another combo with infinite mana. There should be a Fact or Fiction in this deck. I just didn't actually have another spot for one. Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably should put a Fact and a Recurring Insight into this deck. Just thinking. I kind of just shambled this one together. I wasn't planning on changing this Vela deck back into a combo deck because I'm running Circu pretty heavy right now. Those would be obvious inclusions because if I'm not doing tutors, you need more draw, and that makes sense. I am running 2 Planeswalkers in this deck, and my Circu deck I was running the Lilies for a little bit. I like Tamiyo, and this deck tends to usually end up being 1v1 as a few opponents fall behind in multiplayer. Tamiyo helps me lock some potential aggressive creatures out. She does act as a draw, but that emblem is more important, especially with a big counterspell package. And Karn is there as just a really good answer to just about anything I can't deal with. There are only 2 enchantments in this entire deck. I do not want to I just hate Omniscience, personal opinion. It's almost required for Circu. But Equilibrium still works in this deck. If If you haven't seen the Circu deck, I will explain how it works after this bit, after I'm done with the list. And Arena made it, of course, because card draw is fantastic. Let's go on to the small handful of artifacts. I had to have a top. If you notice, I didn't even bother putting a Trinket Mage package in here. Again, I did not want to just have another tutor all-day deck. But Sensei's top still helps us thin. Then map is here just so I can get a few techie lands. It does help to have a few lands that tap for 2 mana. I'm not putting all of them in here like my Circu list, but in this list as a more relaxed combo deck, I'm more likely to actually go for the Cabal Coffers or the Urborg there. Then we do have ramp. My Circu list has very late game ramp like a Gilded Lotus. This one I wanted to put more early game ramp so I can have an earlier presence. So we have the 2/1 drops. I like these guys. Then my favorite 2 drops, the diamonds, and the talisman and the Dimir Signet for my last 2 drops. Essentially meaning I always have some 4 mana costing spell I can cast on turn 3. This is better to do this when you have counter magic in your deck, so you have earlier access to more hard counter spells. And the final artifact, the final non-land permanent in the entire deck, is the Cloudstone Curio. It is another combo piece, essentially the better version of what Equilibrium is trying to do. And then we are going to the lands. Lots of lands here. In my previous Vela list, I was running some janky combos, more casual combos like Mindslaver and the Thopter Assembly Infinite Turn combo. I still have Academy Runes, even though I'm not running Mindslaver in here. It's just a generically good card. Cloudstone Curio is a great thing to get countered, so this will help me get it back. Then, again, in a protective deck, where I'm trying to go for a little bit casual of a game, maybe late game, this will help me untap someone I may need to assign as a chump blocker, something I could possibly bounce back later. This is technically another tutor. It's going to be land tutor. I don't even have a mana crypt in here, but this is going to help me get whatever land I need. Essentially focusing on my mana base is more important. While my Circu deck did not run this, I am running this in here. But we do have the other 2 mana producing lands. These are iffy. You sometimes really don't want to run these out in different metas. But in this particular deck, the combos are assisted by lands that tap for 2 mana. So I've only ran just a few in here. I think there's only 2 or 3. Yeah, there's these 2, and then there's technically the coffers itself. I don't even think I bothered putting a Nykthos in this deck. Again, it's a hindsight. You might want to consider putting something like that in there. Riptide is very important because a lot of my creatures are wizards. I can save Vela, I can reuse Snapcaster, reset the Glenalandra, bounce it to Fairy, whatever I need to do. Then there is, of course, Urborg Coffers. This helps me get a lot of things online faster than I likely should. And then we have the colorful lands. We've got the Command Tower, the River. This is a land I don't also normally like running. It's just, this was a gift. I had to find a place for it. We've got the Buddy land, the Creature land, the Filter land, Pain land, Temple, Shock, and a fake dual land. The deck is almost entirely foil, I believe, except for the Drake and the Whale. It is actually all foil. This is a placeholder. I will most likely take this out. I don't like fake cards, but I cannot get a legitimate, of course, a legitimate foil Underground Sea. This will probably come out if I can ever get a black border beta one, I guess. I might put it in. That's unlikely to happen unless I win the lottery. But I don't like fake cards enough that this may end up becoming a basic land. But of course, then we're on to the basics. I put all my arena promo lands in here, so we have all these swamps. Mostly islands, though. Islands are the predominant color of the deck. But now that you have the deck list here, I'm going to go through the combos. If you've seen the Circu deck, you've probably already understood exactly what the combos are trying to do. If you're seeing this is also much more relaxed. It's a lot less tutors, fewer combo pieces, much more control. There probably should be a bit more draw in here, but there's other ways of winning. I don't actually have to combo in this deck to win. It's a lot easier to win with a bribery and a controlled board state. Just controlling the board, bouncing everything, going crazy with Karn or whatever I need to do. But to combo with Vela, I need to create a loop where creatures are being left, like essentially leaving play, and when they leave play, they all bleed. So creating an infinite loop of creatures coming in and out is a great way of doing that. The obvious default one, the cheap and easy one, is using something like a creature that untaps lands when it comes into play, And the best one there, specifically, my preference is always going to be Palinchron. He has a self-balance ability here. He costs 7. When he comes into play, he untaps 7 lands. So I can tap those 7 lands again and float it. Using 2 of the floating, I can cast a Phantasmal Image, which will then come into play and will untap 7 lands again. I still have the 5 floating, which is more than enough to pay to bounce this back to my hand, gaining 1 mana for every exchange. As I said, if that's going on, I essentially have infinite cast triggers, but he's also leaving play infinitely, and I'm gaining infinite mana, so I can even cast her from the command zone. Phantasmal Image is not required for this, although, if Vela is already in play, and I happen to have a land that taps for more than 1 mana, like the Dimir Aqueduct here, then technically any clone can complete this combination. The only reason Phantasmal Image is great is because he's cheap and he does generate infinite mana. Continuing on, there is other creatures that do enter the battlefield and untap lands. Like there's these 3 essentially. Let me get these back out here, this will be easier. So these are the culprits. These are the ones that untap lands when they come into play. So the obvious other easy one is just Detai, because pairing him with any one of these 3 or 4 creatures, it essentially lets me infinitely flicker that creature with his ability, infinitely leaving play effects, essentially causing everyone to bleed out with Vela. And yet again, that is not the only necessary way of doing it. Deadeye is great because he lets me create infinite mana and do other things too. Since the tuck rule has been removed, that's become less important, although. Then we of course do have Cloudstone Curio. The Curio and any of these creatures that come into play and untap lands can just keep on looping around with any clone. One of them comes into play, the Drake will come in, untap 5 lands. I can then cast this guy, he'll come in and clone this, untapping 5 lands. This will bounce to my hand. I can then continue repeating because the Curio will make me bounce it on and on. Equilibrium does count as another enabler for exactly as the Curio does. You have to be careful with that because this one targets, Equilibrium targets, this does not. So we might accidentally kill your Phantasmal Image. In the Equilibrium does typically require another creature because this happens when you cast, this happens when it comes into play. So there has to be another body on the field to loop the creature over and over again. Otherwise, you don't have a target to clone, and that it stops the combo. But again, just like in the other video, there's lots and lots of subtle interactions. These are just the obvious shoe-in combos. There's lots of other ways of doing it. There's also lots of other synergy. I don't know if I touched on this in my previous Vela video, but there's a really fun trick you can do with Rite of Replication with Vela. If you were to kick Rites of Replication on Vela, you get 5 copies of Vela. The legendary rule is going to trigger, though. You're going to have 6 Velas on the field at once, and 5 of them are going to leave at the same time. So you're going to have 5 times 6 triggers of her ability, essentially netting 30 damage, well, 30 points of life loss to all of your opponents, just from one spell. It's fun things like that that make for very synergistic effects. Again, it's not even a combo, it's just one single spell and your general bleed everyone for 30 damage, or 30 life. There are a lot of other ways of abusing Vela. In my opinion, from what I've playtested with her, flickering is the most efficient and the easiest to obtain and the easiest to protect. You can combo with her using other things. For example, there's a card called Pentavis. It's a flying artifact. You can pay 3 to remove a counter, you get a Pentaphyte. You can pay 3, sack the Pentaphyte, put the counter. If you have infinite colorless mana from whatever source you want, you can go infinite with that guy, creating and removing that Pentaphyte. And that causes her to bleed everyone out because it counts as a leave effect. Alternatively, you can also bleed out everyone using your graveyard. There's lots of looping combinations using your graveyard, like Sacrifice Outlets and a Su-Chi and a Nimdeath Mantle is a classic one. Using things like Gravecrawler and Phyrexian Altar and another zombie's another one. That's just, again, I don't like that one because you're relying on your graveyard, essentially another zone. So your combo is susceptible because you're utilizing another zone. Also, there's less duplicity in the number of cards. You have to have that Gravecrawler. There's no other copies of Gravecrawler that work with that. Another one that's also pretty bad, it's a functional combo, is using something like the Xenograft or Conspiracy. And some of those techie cards, like there's the Avison Caller is one of them, because with one of those you can call, I think it's Angels or Cleric. No, Clerics is Rotlung. You need Rotlung Reanimator and Conspiracy or Xenograft. And then the other one's Avison's Caller with the same thing. You can essentially create infinite tokens. Also just creating infinite creatures and then killing them all with something like Intruder Alarm, and that vampire that taps to create a creature is just another cheesy combo. There's just so many ways of making this work. When it comes to efficiency, and you're actually trying to make it as efficient and strong as possible, personal opinion and from experience, I would suggest the flicker effects, because you have more control. It's stuff that happens all in one turn. You don't have to rely on other zones, and there are easily duplicate parts. Clones and all those creatures that untap are duplicate parts. If you wanted to go all in combo with Vela, then yeah, go ahead and visit those other ideas too. You might even want to take a look at my Circu list and see if you can pull some of the omniscience nonsense out there. A lot of people really don't like omniscience, and it's not necessary for Vela at all. This deck, while it has less combo potential, is still stronger than my all-in Circu combo deck. But yeah, this is just another list. I will go ahead and post this, hopefully right next to my Circu list. I have yet again another Circu list I'll be posting that's a more budget variant. It's the same deck, I'm just changing it over to a different, how I would play it with a different table, a different meta, where it's more budget, it's more resilient, and it's less all-in combo. So it has more resiliency for a late game. It's not just like completely neglecting counterspells and whatnot. And again, if you're interested, this is, again, it's not technically, I guess it is a deck tech. This is more or less supposed to be a guide, a deck list example for a primer. The primer is grossly outdated. I have not had a chance to work on this thing for nearly a year. If you want to leave any feedback, you can definitely leave it here. I'll leave a link to what the current primer is in the description down there, and also a link to Tapped Out for my current deck list for what this is. But any ideas or features, I'm always open and welcome here. And I hope you enjoy.